Thank you for your kind words, Dr. Morris. Dear friends, I think Dr. Morris overestimated me somewhat. I told this story of how I met Maharishi about 2 years ago when I was here, and it really took me about 6 months to unlearn what I had learned at Oxford. At first, it was just his personality which gripped me. There was that lively element of bliss which I'd seen nowhere else. So many swamis and gurus came to England, and I was there at businessmen's houses where they stayed, and everybody who came to those shores I went to see, but there was no one really whom I was tempted to follow. And then in the end, I followed somebody whom I didn't believe. Because when Maharishi first said, it's easy, I just thought, oh, well, you're just saying this because you need disciples. But I liked Maharishi so much, and it was just that personal thing which just kept me going, just that, that fascination with him. And then it was at the first residence course in the winter of 1960 in Germany, in the Black Forest. And there he said something suddenly about the Upanishads, how in meditation we experience the process of creation backwards, so to say, and that's just sparked something off. I think I've told this before. And then suddenly the scales just fell from my eyes, and everything he said was wisdom. And it was just like a cascade. It just poured over me. And from that time, I haven't looked back. It's not that I couldn't, with Maharishi, I couldn't appreciate the fullness of his being. I mean, just that little ego, how could you? Even the love and the compassion which brought him out in what is sometimes called the mud, I couldn't really appreciate. I mean, all the things he endured, our sort of gross ways, and all these, the travel, the animosity, and everything. He just went on year after year because he knew he had something to give which the world needed. But at the first I didn't really appreciate that. But the mind, that I appreciated. Once I'd got there, I appreciated. And I really fell in love with his mind. I just, it was just so wonderful to hear him talk. And I used to ask lots of questions, but my chance really came when you heard last night this beautiful story about how Maharishi started the commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, the banks of the Ganges. Well, this was during first teacher training course in 1961, and I couldn't go. At least I thought I couldn't go. You know how one gets these things. and I had a very good friend there, and she sent me letters about what was going on there. And then she described just what Maharishi said, that one night they went down to the Ganges, and there in the amid the light of torches, and she described the Ganges with logs floating down that looked like bears and so on, and people sitting around Maharishi on the sand and so on. And that he started commenting on the Bhagavad Gita, and she said it was so beautiful, so profound. And you can imagine my feelings. I really felt like Henry V, gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here. Not exactly accursed, but definitely deprived. And but my chance came a year later when he went to Hochkogel in the Austrian Alps. There was a little hotel there, we took 3 or 4 hotels, and it was a beautiful spot. The hotels weren't so marvelous. But Maharishi was sitting in his room there, and there's sort of few people around him, including one very formidable lady. And they were discussing some translations on the Bhagavad Gita. And Mahārshi was asking for some suggestions. This was in chapter 2, I think, beginning of chapter 2. And this lady kept pounding and saying things. And then and Mahārshi said yes. And then I suddenly piped up, Mahārshi, you can't say this. This is not right. And I think this is what Mahārshi had been waiting for, because he knew my background, and at that time I was very lucky to be in that position, because my Sanskrit was never very great, but luckily the Gita is simple Sanskrit, so it was possible, and there was no one else about at the time. So anyway, I started working with him, in other words, and then started the most joyful period of my life. The translations of the Gita and the Brahma Sutras, they were the high point of my life. It was something so wonderful. What was most enjoyable for me was the translating. The commentary too, but the translating. There was, that joy which you get when you find the right word, and then Mahārshi said yes, and something like that. And it's just unbelievable. And then also this great joy of pitting your wits against that giant intellect. It's an indescribable joy. It is, you just say something, and Mahārshi, it's like that famous breaking of the symmetry of the the collapse of the there's this unboundedness, and then you come and you collapse it, and all sorts of goodies come pouring out. And it's wonderful, because ignorance comes up against wisdom, and wisdom has to make the thing more clear. And each step comes out more fully. At that time, Mahārshi took time to do it. Today he hasn't got time for this kind of thing, but it was very good while it lasted. And really a very, very, very fulfilling time. And also there's the beauty of his language, which I found his beautiful cadences, like, phrases like the overwhelming sweetness of the Lord's assurance, or something like that. And they're really wonderful. I loved his language, and I always try to be very faithful to it, because it's such beautiful English. And It was, as I say, a great joy. We did it, the Gita, in all kinds of places, mostly in England, but also in India, and in the summer courses in Europe, in the Italian Alps, and but most of all, really, it was at Henry Nyberg's house in Wiltshire, and I remember one particular occasion, I may have told you that before, when I talked about not recognizing the fullness of his being. I was just there arguing with him tooth and nail about some point in the translation, and we were sitting on a blue velvet rug on the lawn there. It was a lovely day in this country house. And I remember, and suddenly look came into his eyes. He switched off. And then I saw the fullness of his being. I was just, just like Arjuna when he, had that thing. It's just in my heart went like this. And I thought, my God, to whom are you talking? But he switched off again, very suddenly, and then it was all right again, and we just sort of carried on. But luckily, these moments weren't very often that at least I penetrated through that, because otherwise one wouldn't be able to work. But what Dr. Morris said about my education, I think, in some way was quite just. I could, because I had had that education, at first it was an obstacle, but later it became a help, because I really could appreciate the wonderful mind which Mahārshi has, and more actually now. But it was completely fresh and original, and it was in the deepest sense innocent, because it was innocent of received notions. He takes nothing for granted. Everything his intellect, which his intellect falls on, it lights up, everything. It's such a beautiful mind. And it's only that kind of mind where there's absolutely no obstacle between between the transcendent form of speech and the Vaikari, the gross form of speech. It's only that kind of mind that can bring out these wonderful teachings which Mahārshi has given us over those years. And the Gita really was only the beginning. But last night he was telling you about how he zoomed in on those two verses, 245, Nistre Gunyo Bhavajana, and 248, Yogastha Guru Kamani, established in yoga, perform action. But there's also another verse which he was always on talking about, and that was 240, which says, no obstacle exists. Even a little of this Dharma delivers from great fear. It was very, very beautiful. And whenever I made some objection about that it was difficult, he came at me with pratyavaya na vidyate, no obstacle exists. And there are a few other, he obviously didn't, he said he was turning the pages, but he probably didn't get to the 9th chapter, because there's another verse there which says, Susukham katum avyayam. Very easy to practice and imperishable, that this path is very easy to practice and imperishable. So there are various passages in the Gita which make this point. But for some reason it had been overlooked, and everything was in terms of difficulty. The very first meeting I had with Mahārshi, the fellow who brought me, introduced me as a student of Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was a great man, but a man who did a great deal to bring Indian philosophy to the West and make it understandable to the West. And really, we owe a great debt of gratitude to him. But Mahārshi was, when he was laughing, and this wonderful laugh which he had, as if he wasn't able to contain his joy. And he said, oh, Radha Krishna, and yes, I met him, and he said that meditation and self-realization is so difficult, but it's so easy, and he was laughing, just like that. That was the first thing. But really, you can have no idea, unless you're old like me and were about in 1960 seeking, one thing or another. You can have no idea what a revolutionary message this was. He called it revival. It's probably not revolution, because it existed before, but it had been lost for such a long time. That revival, just that great contribution which he made, that if we just take it for granted, it's an everyday thing for us. We have no idea that really what a great thing it was. Just what he said, it's to meditate is not against the grain of the mind. To meditate is natural.